The Business Simplicity Podcast, where leaders share their most successful strategies and the failures that inspired them, so business owners and managers can avoid the suffering and reap the benefits. With your host, Chris Parker.
Welcome back to the Business Simplicity Podcast. We're having a number of conversations in what we're calling the Sustainability Week, and I'm sometimes making the mistake in calling it the Business Sustainability Podcast, but maybe this week that's what it is. We just finished a sustainability sprint, and one of the coaches there was Simon Broad, and he's been on the podcast before. Before we get into the sustainability topics, Simon, can you share with us a little bit about what is it that you do? What are you busy with?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So, of course, I'm a sustainability coach as part of the sustainability sprint. And besides that, I'm an independent advisor in the energy space. I help businesses navigate the transition to clean energy. And something else I do is I'm a trainee Feldenkrais practitioner. A Feldenkrais method is a body-mind learning method. And my interest is increasingly going towards the body-mind connection and how powerful that can be.
I can't resist but to ask more, like, how can the body-mind connection become more powerful?
So certainly in our Western civilization, we tend to think of the body and the mind as separate. And by working on seeing the body and the mind as one and the same thing, we can actually, firstly, realize better who we are. And then once we've done that, change who we are in the ways that we would like to change ourselves. I know that's not the topic for this conversation, but that's something that does actually have some impact during the sprint. So maybe we'll come back to it.
Well, I'm wondering, is it not the topic? Meaning, is it not? And I'm going to go very abstract here, but sustainability, isn't that connecting our strategic business minds into knowing how we operate as a business and discovering new ways to exist as a company? So I think there's some direct parallels there that we can draw.
I like that, and I certainly, I agree, and I also see parallels in the sprint process. The sprint is a series of 5 workshops, and we very deliberately start off with grounding people in what their current activities are. So we're really allowing them to revisit and rediscover what is their current situation, where are they comfortable, and where are the boundaries of that, so that later on during the series of workshops, when they start exploring what they should do more or different, they have a good basis for doing that. So there is a very strong parallel with the body-mind connection.
Yeah, there's a deliberate, structured journey of bringing them from now to the future, and closing on a very tightly articulated series of statements about where they're going. And so maybe explode out from there, and in your own words, can you introduce, if someone asks you, what is a sustainability sprint, in the elevator or wherever? I'm sure random people on the street ask you that all the time. Exactly. At least they will after this podcast. Oh, you're the sustainability sprint guy. What is that?
If we're properly sustainable, I'm not sure about the elevator, maybe the staircase.
Okay.
So it is a process for kickstarting a change in an organization. And to do that, you need participants who already are perceiving that they want to and need to change somehow. And often when that perception happens, a group of people doesn't then know what to do about it. By definition, it means doing something you haven't done before. And this process is a way of letting people see what they can actually do. And people invariably discover that there's a lot more that they can do about things than that they would normally realize. That's one of the magical things that happens during these workshops is typically participants will start off feeling a bit constrained. That yes, they know something's coming along, but they have busy work lives anyway, they haven't got time to do extra stuff and so on and so forth. And then during the process, they realize there's loads of things they can do. I think in this recent sprint we did with Destiny, there were 185 or something like that ideas came up that were all actionable. And in addition, it's not just realizing there's so many things you can do, but also the mindset changes. And people end up feeling more empowered than they were at the start, which is a great part of the whole thing.
Well, you called it magic, and I want to unpack that word magic because it doesn't happen accidentally. There is a reframing, mindset flipping strategy or tactic baked into the sprint. Do you want to, without giving away too much of the secrets behind the Wizard of Oz curtain, because if people go through this, we can't tell them that these are the games we're going to play with your mind on this journey. Yeah. But can you go into the reframing activity and why it works so well? Because it's for me, that's where the aha moments happen. Yeah. So play around with that a little bit for me.
Yeah. So I mean, we use the concept of reframing to really to broaden people's minds. I mean, we as humans in our society, we spend most of our lives in habitual patterns of thought, and it takes some effort or some trigger to get us to go beyond those habitual patterns. And this is what we build into the sprint in different ways. And so we challenge people a little bit to get into an imaginary world, which is one where their habitual thoughts do not actually apply. So they're getting themselves into a space where they have to think a little bit differently, and then extend those thoughts so they're coloring in that world, and then using that picture, that mental picture which we build, to then flip back into, okay, what is the real world? But by having built this more imaginary place, it informs how you think about the real world, and maybe some detail of that other world has triggered a thought that leads to something you can act on in the real world. And we do this in a couple of different ways, but this, I agree, Chris, this is a part where people really get animated, and it's because it's not a habitual exercise that people go through. It's always surprising and has great results.
And I don't think it's something that people would do naturally. It's not like you wake up and say, I'm going to do a mental reframing exercise on myself this morning. Maybe people do, but they have to be pretty well disciplined and trained on it. So
yeah.
I'm going to call you Mr. Simon, because when we were working at Power Peers, we had some Japanese customers and they called you Mr. Simon, and that is just stuck in my brain. So Mr. Simon, looking back, what was a highlight for you? Meaning if you're looking back at this last 5 half days with this particular project we did with Destiny. What did you love about that?
So I loved that so much material came out, so that there's obviously a lot of latent knowledge. I loved that we had a group of people who, although they were colleagues, they didn't necessarily know each other previously. So they're all part of an organization, but were not previously in contact with each other. They all got on with it. They even though they clearly have a very busy work life, they made the time for it. They took it extremely seriously, and they worked really well and really fast. It was very pleasing to see, and came with a great result. And when they were presenting to the executive committee on the end of the last workshop, it was great content, and the executive committee loved it, and that was really a pleasing moment.
So when you say it, it's so obvious, but I had forgotten that some of those people hadn't met each other before. They just through the whole journey, they just clicked tighter and tighter and tighter.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was magic. We didn't intend on that. that was something that happened beyond our influence, I think. No, like, if you think forward about other organizations that might be considering to use the sustainability sprint, who do you think is the perfect organization? Like if that group of people is in the right place where the sustainability sprint would add the absolute most value, how would you describe that group of people?
It's a group of people who want to do more than they're doing today to make their business sustainable, and who don't have an obvious way to do that. And sustainability is complex. There's very few examples where there's one obvious action. Usually there's many possible actions. It's not clear which ones are better than the others. They all require stuff to be measured, so it's potentially a lot of effort. So you want to be very careful before you engage on knowing what you're going to do. You want to be sure you're doing the best thing. And it does need some consideration. It's worth spending the time thinking about it, planning, and so on. This is, I think, those groups of people are going to benefit the most. This will give them a great kickstart where they can confidently go forward with the feeling that they've looked at it from all angles, and they've made their choices which parts to go for and which parts to leave for now. And I think that's the most important thing. It gives them an organized way forward.
I love it that sometimes these decisions are not obvious. Like I learned, like when Diane as a external speaker, and she'll be on the podcast as well, but as a sustainability expert with the Nairobi University and in her own practice, but just things like when to dispose of a piece of equipment is such a complicated topic, and you'd assume that could be an easy decision, but if you're talking about a server or some other piece of larger equipment, simply getting rid of one in order to get a more efficient one isn't always obvious, meaning because the impact of the new one, the impact of getting rid of the old one, how do you do the calculation on the actual efficiency and actually the impact of that? My eyes were widened because there was clearly knowledge in that group, the Destiny team that had they've been thinking about this, obviously, and they combined that with some of the insights from Cisco was presenting and from Diane. It needs time for smart people to make some decisions on how to proceed with some of these things. And there's some cultural things like, okay, well, hey, we depreciate our servers in 4 years and therefore they need to be replaced. Well, that's actually the most ridiculous driver in you know, in the whole thing. So it's do you have any advice on how people can structure themselves to make these decisions more wisely?
The decision requires a lot of understanding that is probably not common knowledge. So you're dealing with things that your business traditionally wouldn't worry about. What happens to your waste streams? I mean, they're waste streams and you pay somebody to take them away and then it's done. But here you're actually required to go into the detail of who's taking them away, what's happening with them, and making sure that that ties back into your own policies. So the whole business landscape gets much more complex. And so I guess you can separate actions out into the ones that you really can do within your own organization and the ones that need coordination upstream and downstream in your supply chain. And then make your choices. But often the ones that are involve the supply chain are the more impactful actions. And that's also where it gets exciting, because you can form different kinds of partnerships. And within that supply chain, some parties will be thinking the same way that you are and wanting to become more sustainable. And then you have some very natural allies in what you're trying to achieve, and things can spark from that. There's all kinds of new business models getting developed that way, because parties are working in collaboration in ways that historically hasn't taken place. So there's a lot of upsides to looking at your business in a new way. But again, the decision what to do first has to be taken by each business, you know, based on their own situation, and that's something the sprint can really help with.
Yeah, two thoughts come to me, but one, in all of these conversations, if you look at your business with some discipline, and sustainability demands some discipline, there's so much additional value that will come from it. So, you know, not only will we be helping to, you know, save the planet and you know, improve your sort of your ESG approach, but looking at your supply chain and your business processes and your materials and your waste streams, there's obvious other financial benefits and other types of benefits as well. So it's just a good thing to do. One of the things that also jumped out from this one was that it's to change the behavior of your supply chain. It's difficult, and it's not obvious to force your customers to change their behavior. You know, ideally you can build into your product some more sustainability and some soft nudges and things, but you can definitely put more pressure on your suppliers. And so this is one of the things that came up was definitely look with some rigor into your so call it your downstream supply chain on who you're buying stuff from, or would that be upstream? I don't know. And then also look at yourself, and then start finding ways in your product or service. How can you build that in and start connecting those dots like that? So, Mr. Simon, I'm curious, now that we've had this conversation, we started with Feldenkrais, and you intimated that there might be some direct connections, and we talked about a bit of that, but can we loop that back now and see, you know, is there a body mind connection within a business organization around sustainability that we can really put our finger on?
So the part where I really see the parallels with the body mind work that I do is in our mindset exercise, where we're reframing situations, and that's quite an abstract exercise. I mean, it's really a thought exercise, and yet because you're reframing and trying to see the world and your place in the world in a different way, this is actually very much what we're doing in body-mind learning. In body-mind learning, we do it with the help of the body, which makes it a bit more immediate, but the actual process is very much the same. And the result is that people come out of that knowing themselves a little bit better and understanding a little bit better which possibilities or preferences they have. So I definitely see a connection there, if not in the actual things that we do, but in the mental process that goes with it, and the transformation that people go through.
Yeah, that's what I personally love about these sprints is the fact that currently the four of us that run it with Jessica and Vim and you and I, we bring such different gifts to this, and it makes it a very rich experience in its design, in its delivery, and also I guess the rigor that we have, because we keep a record of minor and major improvements every day. Every day of the sprint, we're like, okay, how about that? And it just gets better and better and better. So, Mr. Simon, thank you so much for joining. I will put on the show notes a link to the sustainability sprints, and I think also you sharing a Feldenkrais page as well.
I have a blog which I've just launched. I would love for people to go there and explore.
Great. And what's just so we can call it out, what's the web address of the blog?
It's bodymind.space.
Bodymind. Oh wow, bodymind.space. So we'll put that on there. Please, people, check that out. Love it. Mr. Simon, thank you so much. Very much looking forward to the next sustainability sprint we do together.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Download the Simplicity Toolkit from Ebullient.com to discover the power of the Simplicity Scan and Sprint. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite player.